Hello, welcome to the fall semester at Austin Community College and to a course entitled Introduction to Psychology. I'm Dan Grangard and I'm going to be your professor this semester, and I look forward to working with you. Let me begin by telling you a little bit about myself so you know where I'm coming from in teaching this course. I have many years of experience as a clinician, and consequently, everything that we teach, I will back up with a real life example of psychology in practice. Some textbooks will give examples of things they heard about, or maybe they might even just make up. But because I've had so many years of clinical experience, I will be able to provide you with real life examples of psychology in practice. So let me begin by giving you a little bit of history about my own background so you know where I'm coming from. First of all, I have 3 degrees from Baylor University. I have a bachelor's degree where I actually majored in sociology, and then I minored in psychology. Then I have a Master of Science degree in educational psychology. And then I have a doctorate in educational psychology. While I was working on my doctorate at Baylor, I taught undergraduate courses similar to this one. And I also did some supervision of student interns. My first real job, I guess you could say, position as a psychologist after I finished my graduate work was I was a school psychologist for the Education Service Center Region 12, which is in Waco, Texas. I was the only doctoral level school psychologist serving 81 school districts in 12 counties, if you can imagine something like that. I would get up in the morning, drive 60 or 70 miles out to some little town, give a couple of IQ tests or something. That wasn't my idea of being a psychologist. And so I kept applying for other kinds of positions. One summer when I was a student at Baylor, I had a roommate that I shared an apartment with who was from Austin, and there was a weekend when we were out of money and out of food, and he said, this would be a good weekend to go visit my parents. And so we came down here. I absolutely fell in love with Austin, and I said, boy, that's where I'd like to live someday. So, I kept applying for positions in Austin, and I succeeded in landing one as a school psychologist for the Austin Independent School District. I did that for the next 8 years. Each year I was assigned 3 or 4 school buildings to go to, and typically an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. We would tend to change schools from years to year in order to move the staff around, if you will. And so I ended up as the school psychologist in a lot of schools in Southwest Austin, South Austin, and East Austin. Well, I guess I even got to a few in North Austin as well. But the only school I survived at the whole 8 years was Oak Hill Elementary. In fact, I always like to say I survived 3 different principals at Oak Hill Elementary. As far as high schools were concerned, I spent a couple of years at LBJ High School over in East Austin. and 5 years at Austin High, which of course is located downtown on Lady Bird Lake. So gained a lot of experience doing that. While I was a school psychologist for the Austin ISD, I also supervised school psychology interns from Texas State University down in San Marcos and from the University of Texas at Austin. During that time, I also did a fair amount of research with people that I was working with, published any number of articles in psychology journals and things like that. All psychologists, though, reach a point where they say, I want to do things my way. And they decide they're going to start their own private practice. And I had a friend who was a gynecologist and an obstetrician who told me that I could use his office in the evenings rent-free. And so I started a private practice in psychology in a gynecology office. And there's all kinds of funny stories I could share with you about that. And that went on for a couple of years. The great thing about being a school psychologist is you get the summers off. And so during the regular year, school year, I would work from about 8 in the morning till 4 or 5 in the afternoon for the school district, and then I'd go to my private office in the gynecologist's office right after school, and I would work in the early evenings, and I would work on Saturday mornings and that kind of thing. In the summer, of course, I was able to work on my private practice full-time. Well, it got to the point where when I was a school psychologist at Austin High, there was a student there who was graduating in the top 10 in her class, but she wasn't going to be number 1. She wasn't going to be the valedictorian because although she had a perfect A average, she hadn't taken enough advanced placement classes and honors classes and things like that. And this made her very upset that she wasn't going to be the valedictorian. So she started sending death threats to the principal and the assistant principal and people like that. In fact, the assistant principal's first name was Jack, and one day she sent him a poem that said, "Death be nimble, death be quick. Forget the candlestick, kill Jack." And then you always knew it was from her because she had her own special logo that looked like this, that she would write on the bottom of these notes. Well, when you do that, you get to meet the school psychologist. And as you could probably predict, this young lady already had a psychiatrist on the outside that she had been seeing. And so I started consulting with him, and he and I really hit it off. And he said, why don't you move your private practice into my office? Might be more appropriate than a gynecology office. And so I did that. And he started giving me all kinds of referrals for psychological testing. And by the way, he was the only child psychiatrist on both the city and state's health plans. So we had a lot of people coming through the office. Typically, when I would do the psychological evaluations, if I hit it off with the patient, he'd say, "Why don't you go ahead and do the therapy too?" A lot of psychiatrists are more into prescribing medications than they are into doing psychotherapy. And so, suddenly I was doing lots of psychological testing and psychotherapy. Uh, he helped me gain clinical privileges at all the various psychiatric hospitals in town. And so suddenly I was doing a fair amount of hospital work as well. And then it kind of got to the point where I was so busy in my private practice that I didn't really need to continue as a school psychologist anymore. The school district actually offered me a promotion, but it was going to mean giving up my private practice, and I didn't want to do that. And so instead of taking the promotion, I resigned from the school district and I started doing private practice full time. My office was over at Medical Science Center on 38th Street and just down the street from Shoal Creek Hospital. So things were really humming. After a couple of years, though, the psychiatrist decided he was going to move to Dallas. He loved being a psychiatrist, but he really disdained working with insurance companies. And he had an opportunity to go to Dallas and be the chief psychiatrist for an adolescent unit at a psychiatric hospital. And so he decided to move up there. Tried to get me to come too. That was very tempting, but I wanted to stay in Austin. So I continued on in private practice here. It wasn't long after that a large clinic in Dallas opened a satellite clinic in Austin, and they recruited me to work there. Basically, I merged my private practice with that large clinic, and I became chief psychologist, director of intern training, and director of testing for this large clinic. And the clinic had over 50 professionals working at it. Half dozen psychiatrists, a similar number of psychologists, licensed professional counselors, clinical social workers, nurses. The clinic was so large that we had our own day hospital and we had our own 20-bed inpatient unit at Shoal Creek Hospital. Two of the psychiatrists were child psychiatrists. And then one of them worked with senior citizens, did a lot of geriatric practice, and the others mainly saw adults. So I found myself working with the entire lifespan of patients. I was doing everything from dementia evaluations of hospital patients to comprehensive psychological evaluations of people in all age groups, and you name it. The clinic was so big, we had our own daily radio show. Occasionally I was on the radio answering questions from call-in listeners and things like that. The clinic was so big, we had our own conference center and you name it. Eventually, though, the clinic got bought out by a chain of clinics that had their headquarters in California, which ended up closing down the Austin branch due to financial things related to managed healthcare. I went back into private practice. I opened an office out in Westlake Hills, and I continued that for a number of years until an opportunity came along to teach classes at Austin Community College. After I taught here for a year or two, an opportunity came along to also teach courses at St. Edward's University. And so, it got to where I was teaching 6 or 7 courses a semester, three or so at ACC and 3 or 4 at St. Ed's. And about all the time I had left to do my clinical practice was on Fridays. And, that wasn't really sufficient time to do that. And then an opportunity came along to work at ACC full-time, half-time counseling and advising in what now is called student accessibility services, and then half-time teaching. And so I started doing that. So this is like my 28th year to teach courses at ACC. And of course, I was in the classroom for all those years, but back when COVID hit a few years ago, we all had to move our classes online. And I rather enjoyed teaching classes online because I didn't have to fight the Austin traffic anymore. They were totally renovating the Rio Grande campus, which is where I was doing my counseling and advising. And so I was going to lose my office for a few years. So I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to retire from the clinical aspect of work there, and I'm just going to focus on teaching. And, I've since enjoyed teaching online because I don't have to fight the Austin traffic getting to and from one of the campuses. I can also teach classes from anywhere, and that's kind of fun. So I've switched to focusing on online teaching, and I do everything I can to make the class as close to what it might feel like to take it in the classroom. So I'm thrilled that you've signed up for my online section here. And let's take a look at the syllabus. On Blackboard there, you can click on a link to it, and let's go through it together, and I can point out some of the things I would like you to focus on. The textbook is called Exploring Psychology in Modules. I'm using the 11th edition. I think the 12th has probably come out. I haven't seen it yet. But I'm sticking with the 11th, and that way you ought to be able to find a copy cheaper. But for that matter, if you can get an earlier version for next to nothing, go for it. I say that because, I'm quite active in things like the American Psychological Association and the Division on Teaching Psychology and all that sort of thing. And, every 2 years I have to acquire 40 continuing education credits. So I stay very up on all the latest developments, even things that have come out since the latest version of the textbook was published. So I will keep us up to date on all the latest stuff. So if you can get an earlier edition of the text cheaper, go for it. The only problem is you might find some of the topics have been shifted around into a different module. In fact, when I say I'm using the book in modules, they're like chapters, but they're chopped up into shorter sections. So, rather than have one 30-page chapter, there might be 3 10-page modules. And that way I can pick and choose which module might be the most relevant to a topic that we study. In all sincerity, though, you could probably make it through this course without even purchasing the textbook, because everything that you're going to need to know for tests, I'm going to be teaching you. What the textbook is valuable for is perhaps further explaining something that you're still not clear on. But outside of that, I don't know that you actually need a textbook, okay? So let's just take a look at the purpose of the course, and that's to promote key concepts in psychology. The course is designed to be an introduction to both the science and the profession of psychology. You know, psychology is a profession. I was a professional psychologist, still am for that matter. But the practice of psychology wouldn't be worth anything without the science backing it up. And so we're going to be taking a look at psychology as a science and a profession. The course will assist you in developing a foundation of basic knowledge in order to pursue further studies in specific areas of psychology. You know, Intro to Psych is a prerequisite to all the other psychology courses that are offered anywhere, for that matter. We will survey topics such as learning, memory, sensation and perception, personality, lifespan development, the biology of behavior, stress and health, psychological disorders, social psychology, research methods. One of my favorite topics is states of consciousness, where we get into things about sleep and dreams and things like that. We'll take a look at approaches to psychotherapy. All these different components that, should you choose to major or minor in psychology, you might want to explore in more depth in the future. So again, everything we study I will back up with a real case example, and I think that will bring the subject alive for you. Okay, let's take a look at the course requirements. Beginning on the first page there. Number 1, read the textbook. And again, as I've already mentioned, you could probably get by without the textbook, but I have, beginning on page 4 of your syllabus, I have outlined which modules in the 11th edition of the textbook will further clarify and back up topics that we discussed. I've also set the course up, it's a semester-long class. I've set it up as if it's a Monday and Wednesday class, just to give you some guidance on how to stick to the outline in order to make it through the entire course in a timely fashion. And so, for instance, on page 4 of your syllabus, I'm assuming that the first day that this material has been available, August 21st, that you're watching this introductory video that I've made and gone over the syllabus with me. In fact, the first thing that I mentioned was about my background. And one of the first things I would like you to do is to shoot me an email, and you'll find my email address at the top of page 2. It's dgran, D-G-R-A-N, at austincc.edu. Shoot me an email and tell me a little bit about yourself. Maybe where you are from. Many of you may not be from Austin. Maybe you grew up somewhere else. Just tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me about your interests. What do you like to do for fun? What's your major? What's your career goal? Some things like that. I've had a few students make a little video on their cell phone, kind of like this one I'm making, and send me that. That was especially fun because I got to see you and get a feel for what you like. So do that as soon as you can. Then notice on back to page 4 of the syllabus, if you were to do this as a Monday, Wednesday kind of study class, if you will, then on Wednesday, do all the things that are posted on Blackboard associated with psychology as a profession and science. And then I've got the modules attached to that if you need some support in understanding the material. And then next week, we'll get into neuroscience and behavior, parts of the brain, what different parts of the brain, how they function and so on. Then we'll get into neurobiology and neurons, and we'll get into things about medications and so on. I don't know about you, but when I was a student, one of my pet peeves was I was never very good at outguessing professors in regards to what was important to read, what might be on a test. Well, I've taken the guesswork out of it for you, beginning on the bottom of page 5 there. Notice I've got learning objectives for the topic, learning objectives that go with the various modules. And you'll find these on each page. So what I would say to you is, if you're going to be reading the text, before you read any of the modules, read the learning objectives for those modules. And that way, when you're reading the module, you can zero in on the learning objectives. You know, whenever I used to read things, I'd underline stuff and highlight stuff and write stuff in the margins, and then none of that was on the test. And then things that I thought were insignificant, there were all kinds of stuff on the test about. That will not happen in this course. If you want to know what is important to read in the text, it's the things that are listed in the learning objectives that are in your course syllabus for each topic and the corresponding modules. That way, when you read those things, you can underline them and highlight them and do whatever you're going to do to them. And other things are for your own interest. Okay? So that's the first thing related to that. Back to page 1 of the syllabus. Number 2, regularly check the announcements on Blackboard. You know, I would do that for sure every week, maybe even every few days, because if there's something that I need to communicate with you, I will post those announcements on Blackboard. If there's something that I might need to send to you, I will send it perhaps as an attachment through email. You know, like if suddenly there was a special handout or something I wanted everybody to have, I might do it that way. Okay, so regularly check the announcements on Blackboard. And then point number 3, exercise self-discipline. This is an independent study course. And so, although I've set it up to where it's like a Monday, Wednesday study course, you're not going to be in a classroom on those days. And so it'd be easy to fall behind and not pace yourself like you need to. So try and stick with the outline so that you don't get behind. If I think you've fallen behind because you haven't taken certain tests on time and that sort of thing, I'll try and contact you via email and see what's going on. But if a change isn't made, I always have the option of dropping you from the course because I don't want you to end up with a bad grade. So try and stick with the pace that I've set up in the course syllabus, okay? And then point number 4 on the first page of the syllabus is, it says successfully complete 4 tests. And the tests, if you go to, let's see, top of page 3 of the course syllabus, notice that the tests will be in a multiple choice true-false format. You take them on Blackboard. The tests are open notes, open book, and I give you a week to complete the test. So you literally can start it without finishing it in one sitting. It's better if you were to do it all in one sitting, because that way you will stay on task as it's set up in the course syllabus. But typically you'll have a week to finish the test. So if you look again on page 4 and 5 of the course syllabus, notice that test 1 will be made available for people to take on Monday, September 18th. And again, ideally, take the test on Monday, September 18th. I wouldn't delay it. But for sure, notice you must have completed it by the following Monday at the end of the day, which is September 25th. You have to have completed it by then. Test 2 will be made available on Monday, October 9th. You need to have for sure completed test 2 by the end of the following Monday, October 16th. Test 3 will be Wednesday, November the 8th. You need to have completed that by Wednesday, November the 15th. And then the last test, you have a little bit less than a week to complete. It'll be made available on Wednesday, the 6th of December, and the semester ends the following Sunday, that Sunday, December the 10th, so you have to have completed test 4 by then. By the way, test 4 is just test 4. It'll be over the last set of topics that we study together. It's not a comprehensive final, okay? Each test will also have a bonus essay test, where you can earn up to 5 points added onto your score. Now, this is not extra credit. I don't offer extra credit. Extra credit's something some people do to try and bring up a grade that's lower than they want it. I don't offer extra credit. I feel like if you're working on extra credit, you're not working on what you ought to be working on, which is getting ready for the next test. This is bonus points. In other words, it'll be a bonus essay question that you, again, it's open book, open notes, but you would write up an answer to the bonus essay, and then you would email it to me as an attachment. And if you wrote a great answer, I'll add another 5 points to your score on the test. But it's something that you submit when you, either before or at the time you actually submit the objective, in other words, multiple choice, true, false part of the test. This isn't something you decide after you got your score, say, oh, I could use some more points. No, that's not what this is. This is bonus points. It's not extra credit, okay? Now then, there's absolutely no reason not to do well on the test. I'll tell you why. One, I post on Blackboard review questions for the test. And these review questions come right out of the test. Another thing that you can do is use these learning objectives as questions to study for a test. You know, one of my pet peeves as a student was a professor would yak about something forever, and then there'd be 1 or 2 questions on the test about it. And then something that the person spent 5 minutes on, half the test would be about. That will not happen in here. What's emphasized in the lectures and the reading handouts and things like that is what will be emphasized on the tests. And that brings up the third thing that you can do in preparation for the test. And that is, I will have a live test review session on Zoom that you can attend if you want to. And if you can't make it, I will record it and you can watch it later. But this is an opportunity for you to ask me questions about anything that's not clear in your mind. Okay? So, between the test review questions, the learning objectives, and the live test review sessions on Zoom, and then it's open book, open notes. Come on, if you don't make good grades, something's not right. That tells me you're not studying any of the material, and then you think you can just look up the answers, and that's something you can't do. Don't think that you can just blow everything off and then look up the answers, because my questions aren't those kinds of questions. In testing, we often follow something called Bloom's taxonomy, which has multiple levels to it, but just as a for instance, a knowledge level question would be a definition of something or a fact. Yeah, those are things you can look up, but you won't find very many of those questions on my test. A comprehension level question is, can you take the material and pick out an example of it? And an application level question would be, can you take the material you've studied and make a prediction with it? Most of my questions would be at the comprehension and application levels. So don't attempt to just take the test and think I can look up all the answers. There's nothing to it. If you don't do well in the tests, that will be why that you took that approach. Okay? I know none of you will even consider doing that. Once everyone has once you've completed the test and submitted it, then Blackboard will tell you what your score is. Once everyone has completed the test, in other words, once it's past the date due deadline, then you'll be able to get in there and see specifically what you missed and what the right answer was. I will post class statistics on Blackboard so you can see how you did compared to everybody else. And I will do that after everyone has completed the test. If you look at the bottom of page 3, notice 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 89 is a B, 70 to 79 is a C, 60 to 69 is a D, and less than 60 would be failing. Okay, the other course requirement is, if you go back to page 1 again, the cover sheet of the course syllabus, is I want you to read some kind of psychology book. I say self-help. It could be something more technical than that, but it could be a self-help book like Happiness is a Choice or something like that. Getting Over Your Depression in 12 Steps, or it could be one of those kinds of books. Or it could be something more technical, like say, Piaget's theory of, or let's say Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance or something like that. It could be something more technical than that. But anyway, I want you to then turn in a 1-page, single-space typed report. And that report will be submitted through Blackboard to me. Blackboard will screen your book review for plagiarism and things like that. And of course, plagiarism is basically something that you didn't write. You can quote somebody else to your heart's content, but you need to give the source credit for who wrote that. Don't try and pass it off as your own. Beginning on page 9 of your course syllabus, I have some recommendations on how to evaluate a self-help book. And by the way, if you look at the links there on Blackboard, I have a sample book report for you to see and a sample grading form that I developed for grading the book reports. I grade these very objectively, okay? And the first part of the report should be simply a biographical entry where you've got the name of the author, the title of the book, the year the book was written, and the name of the publisher. That section alone is worth 10 points. And then the next section is information about the author. I want to know how the author became an authority on this topic. I couldn't care less whether or not the author was on this talk show or that talk show. Being an authority gets you on the talk show. Being on the talk show doesn't make you an authority. Okay? In other words, where did the author get his or her training? You know, where did they go to school? Where have they worked? How did they become an authority on this topic? That's what I want to know about the author. I don't want a listing of all the other books they've written. I want to know about their credentials. So be careful about some of these books that are out there. And by the way, I have to approve your book choice for a couple of reasons. One, I won't approve any book that I don't think will get you a good grade. And second, everyone in the class needs to read a different book. I will post on Blackboard a link that takes you to all the books that have been chosen and approved so far, and therefore you can't pick because somebody else already did. But I have to approve the title, and I need to do this by the day of the first test. So, remember, the first test is Monday, September the 18th. So by that day, I need to have approved your book title. Maybe you're going to luck out because you read one over the summer, and so all you got to do is write up the report. But in writing up that report, I want to know that the author has some bona fide credentials. By the way, I've outlawed books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. You know, the guy who wrote that had a mail-order doctorate from somewhere in Canada that has since been shut down. It's all just his own opinion. He doesn't back it up with research or anything like that. So, bibliographical entry, information about the author, how the author became an authority on the topic. And this might take digging somewhere other than just the book jacket. And then a summary of the main points. In my sample report I have there, I've set it up as bullets, but it doesn't have to be bullets. It could be a paragraph. It's up to you. But what's the thesis of the book? What were the main points that the author made? And then finally, the evaluation section. By that I mean, how did the author support or fail to support the main points? Did the author cite research studies that have been done? Did the author give case examples from clients or patients that the author has counseled? Does the author quote other authorities in the field? For example, if you want to read a great book about the differences in how men and women think, read something like The Male Brain by Lou Ann Brisendine, or The Female Brain by Lou Ann Brisendine. Lou Ann Brisendine is, a psychiatrist and a professor at Stanford, and these are relatively small paperbacks, and literally half the book is a list of references backing up everything that she says. What I would tell you is don't choose any book that doesn't have a list of references in the back. That's a red flag to me that this person hasn't done their homework, or they're not giving credit to where their ideas are coming from. So look for a list of references in the back. So that last section, evaluation, how did they or did they not support the thesis, the main points, okay? So, each of those sections is worth like 30 points. 30 points for the info about the author, 30 points for the thesis, and 30 points for the evaluation part. One page. You can play around with the margins. You can go down to about size 8 font. I can still read it just fine. I don't have any trouble reading things up close. Do get in contact with me soon about what book you're thinking about reporting on, okay? The book report counts the same as a test. And if you look at the bottom of page 3, top of page 4 of your syllabus, you'll notice that grades will be based on the average of your performance on 4 tests and a book review. So in other words, each test and the book review, each one of those counts 20% of your grade. So if you're doing quite well on the tests, a good book report will guarantee you a great grade in the course. If your test scores are a little lower, here's a big opportunity to boost up your average by writing a fantastic book report, because it counts the same as a test. Okay? Please don't do anything so foolish as to buy a report online or something like that, or think you can get AI to write it for you or something. I've occasionally, I've been teaching here 28 years. I've occasionally had a student try to cheat that way. It's first of all, it's always a dead giveaway when the report's in the wrong format. It doesn't look like that sample report I've provided you with. I remember one guy handed in a book report. This was years ago, but it was a dead giveaway. I called him into my office. I said, I want to talk to you about your book report. You didn't write this. Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. It's all my work. I went, well, let me show you on my computer where I found the report. Word for word. He's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't write it. I said, how much did you pay for this report? He said $30. I said, $30? It's a C report. It's not a good report. And now that I know you bought it, it's not even a C report. It's a F. Please don't do anything so foolish. The point of this is so that you get something out of the course, not just a grade. That's what I want more than anything. I want you to be able to connect this course to your own life and the lives of other people that you know. It's not about making a grade. it's life application, if you will. If you have a disability and need special accommodations of any kind, please let me have your accommodation letter as soon as possible so that we can make those kind of arrangements. So, again, middle of page 3, just some encouraging things. Be careful about plagiarism, trying to pass somebody else's work off as your own, or collusion. Collusion with, you can't get together with another person in the class and work on the test together. You do number 7 and I'll do number 10. No, that's collusion. And one semester, almost never had anybody cheat in class, but I've had a couple over the last quarter century. In one course I was teaching, there was this guy and his girlfriend in the same class, and they'd sit next to each other, and she'd come in she'd wear a baseball cap on test days, so I guess she thought I couldn't see her eyes, and she was basically copying his answers. Well, it's kind of a dead giveaway when I scored the tests and they had the same score, they got the same questions wrong, and they put the same wrong answers. I had to bring him into my office and confront him about it. So sad. Funny thing happened one year, though. I was teaching a course, and someone in the class was, it was pretty obvious they were copying the answers of the person next to them. I didn't do anything about it because the person whose answers they were copying had the lowest average in the class and was doing very poorly. I thought, if you want to copy their answers, you go right ahead. That's just... I know none of you are going to do crazy things like that. No cheating, no fabrication, all that kind of jazz. Note on page 5, the last day to drop the course is November the 16th. Hopefully we won't lose very many students, but I know things come up. People get new jobs, people move, people end up with traumatic events in their lives, and they fall behind, and unfortunately sometimes people end up bailing out. I understand. But I'm hoping everybody will hang on for the long run here. Again, back to page 9, a little bit more about evaluating a self-help book. The author should be qualified. They should have bona fide credentials. The book should be based on sound scientific theory and not the author's pseudo-scientific theories or armchair observations. It should not promise the impossible, and so on. Okay, I think I've covered most of the main things in the syllabus. I also mentioned my teaching philosophy in there. I like to have fun. I feel like if I'm not having a good time, nobody else is either. I was coaching a kids' basketball team last winter, And towards the end of the season, I was having a frustrating time during practice when nobody was paying attention to me. And I finally just yelled at them. I said, hey, look, this is supposed to be fun. And, you know, I'm not having fun because nobody's listening to me. Pay attention. You know, the coach, the teacher has to be having a good time too. And I feel like if I'm not, certainly you're not. So I like to have a good time in my teaching. I like to infuse lectures with real-life examples of psychology in practice. I like to maximize use of media. You're going to find in Blackboard, I've got some video lectures. I've got some PowerPoint lectures that are accompanied by audio tapes. Digital, audio, digital things. I've got some video clips to watch, links to various websites and so on. It's not just all one thing. I like to maximize use of media to illustrate the main points. I hopefully will make the material relevant to your vocational and your personal aspirations, and hopefully identify how psychology permeates virtually every area of our lives. Okay, I think I've covered the works here. And so, the next thing your first assignment, if you will, ASAP, shoot me an email and tell me a little bit about yourself. Again, why are you taking the class? What's your major? What's your career goal? What do you like to do for fun? What are you interested in? I look forward to getting to know each of you as the semester proceeds.